My siblings were ready to declare war over our father's will. He left every single penny of a fortune built over 3 generations to a complete stranger. To them, it was the ultimate betrayal, a final, senile act of madness that a team of cutthroat lawyers had to fix. They were sharpening their knives, ready to carve up the woman who'd stolen their birthright. But I saw something else entirely. I saw a puzzle. And when I found the last, devastating piece, when I found out the stranger was his secret daughter, the war I decided to wage wasn't for the money. It was against the very foundation of lies my family was built on. My siblings wanted to fight a stranger. I decided to team up with my sister to destroy our family. Grief is a strange, hollowed-out room. You just wander through it, touching the furniture of your memories, but none of it feels solid. The day my father died, the whole house felt like that. The air was thick with a silence that was heavier than any sound. My older brother, Daniel, was already in the library, his voice a low, angry buzz on the phone. My sister, Chloe, was probably upstairs, swiping through photos of herself to find the one that projected the most tragic, yet beautiful, sadness. My mother was a ghost, just a pale figure drifting from room to room, her face a mask of practiced stoicism I could never quite read. And me, I was the youngest, the quiet one, the observer in a family of performers. I was sitting in my father's favorite armchair, the leather worn smooth and cool against my skin, trying to remember the last real conversation we'd had. Not about business or family duties or Chloe's latest drama. It was about a book. He looked up at me over his glasses, a rare, genuine light in his eyes, and said, "It's about a man who builds a second life to escape his first." At the time, I thought it was just a comment on the novel. Now, it felt like a confession. The day of the will reading felt less like mourning and more like a hostile corporate takeover. We all sat in the polished mahogany tomb of our family lawyer's office. Mr. Abernathy, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with disappointment, cleared his throat. Daniel leaned forward, practically vibrating. He'd been groomed since birth to take over Sterling Industries. He saw the will as a formality, the passing of the crown. Chloe was next to him, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her $1,000 handbag, her boredom obvious. She just wanted to know how many more shopping sprees she was good for. Mr. Abernathy started reading in a dry monotone that sucked all the air out of the room. He droned on about small bequests, a few thousand here, a small stock portfolio there. Daniel's legs started jiggling with impatience. Then came the main event. The estate, the company, the legacy. Mr. Abernathy paused, took a sip of water, and adjusted his glasses. It was pure theater, and we were his captive audience. "And as to the remainder of my estate," he read, his voice flat, "including all shares in Sterling Industries, all properties real and personal, and all financial accounts, I bequeath the entirety without condition to..." He paused again. My brother leaned in so far he nearly fell out of his chair. My mother, for the first time all day, looked up, her eyes locked on the lawyer. "To Ms. Alara Vance." The name dropped into the silence like a stone in a well. Vance? Who the hell was Alara Vance? I looked at Daniel. His smug face had gone slack with disbelief. His mouth was hanging open, as if he'd been about to say something and the words just vanished. Chloe's perfect face was a canvas of confusion. "Who?" she whispered, the sound sharp and brittle. Daniel found his voice first. It was a roar. "Who the hell is Alara Vance? Is this a joke? Abernathy, what is this?" Mr. Abernathy remained impassive. "I can assure you, Daniel, this is no joke. The will is legally sound. Your father was of sound mind and very clear about his intentions when he signed it." "Sound mind? He left a billion-dollar empire to a nobody." Daniel slammed his hand on the table, rattling the water glasses. "We're contesting. We're getting our own lawyers. This is insane." Chloe was already on her phone, thumbs flying. "I can't find anyone with that name. No one important anyway, just some person in the city." My mother said nothing. She'd gone even paler, almost translucent. She stared at a spot on the wall behind Mr. Abernathy, her expression completely, terrifyingly blank. It wasn't the shock of a grieving widow. It was the silence of someone who already knew. That was the first crack in the facade. The first sign that this wasn't random, but the final move in a game I never knew was being played. The car ride home was a hurricane of fury. Daniel was shouting into his phone, barking orders at some poor lawyer, throwing around phrases like undue influence and lack of capacity. Chloe was crying, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. "Everything we worked for," she sobbed. "Everything Dad promised us." Worked for? Chloe had never worked a day in her life. Daniel saw the company as his birthright, not something he'd earned. Their grief wasn't for our father, it was for their money. I was quiet. The name Alara Vance echoed in my head. It didn't sound like a villain's name. It sounded normal. And a question started to whisper in my mind, buried under the roar of my siblings' greed. Not how could he do this to us, but why? Why would our father, a man obsessed with legacy and reputation, do something so public, so destructive? What was he trying to tell us? That night, while the other two plotted their legal war, I went into my father's study, his sanctuary. It always smelled of old books, leather, and faint, sweet pipe tobacco. It was exactly as he'd left it. I ran my hand over his desk, over the stacks of papers. I wasn't looking for a loophole. I was looking for an answer. For him. My siblings saw the will as a betrayal of the family. But standing there in the quiet of my father's room, I started to wonder if the real betrayal had happened a long, long time ago. Maybe the will wasn't the problem, but the answer to a secret. I didn't want a lawyer. I wanted the truth. And I had a feeling the only person who had it was the one person my family wanted to destroy, Alara Vance. I sat down at his computer, the leather of his chair cool against my skin, and with trembling fingers, I typed her name into the search bar. The war for my father's legacy was on. I was just fighting for the other side. Finding Alara Vance online was like chasing a ghost. No social media, no splashy career announcements, nothing in the society pages. Just a few digital crumbs, a public address for an apartment in a quiet part of the city, and a mention in an art gallery's newsletter for a group show 5 years ago. She was a painter. Meanwhile, Daniel's private investigators were digging for dirt, anything to paint Alara as a manipulative gold digger. "We'll find something," he sneered over dinner, his eyes gleaming. "A drug charge, a messy ex, a mountain of debt. Everyone has a secret." He was trying to sound confident, but it just made my stomach turn. He wasn't trying to understand Dad. He was trying to erase his last wish. I couldn't do it that way. I needed to understand, not attack. So I started in my father's study. For days, I sifted through his private world. I went through old filing cabinets, boxes in the back of his closet, drawers full of forgotten things. At first, nothing. Then, in the bottom drawer of his personal desk, buried under old yearbooks, I found a small, locked metal box. It was plain, gray, and totally out of place. There was no key. Daniel would have taken a crowbar to it. I spent 2 hours trying every small key in the house. Nothing. Finally, I remembered something Dad once told me about a combination lock. The most important dates are the ones nobody else celebrates. It wasn't his birthday or my mother's or any of our anniversaries. I tried the date the company was founded. Nothing. Then it hit me. I remembered Dad sometimes getting distant and sad in early spring. I never knew why. I started trying dates in March. March 1st. March 2nd. Then March 15th. The lock clicked open. My heart was pounding. Inside, there was no treasure. Just a small stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon and a single, worn photograph. The photo was of my father, looking younger than I'd ever seen him, his arm around a woman with a bright, beautiful smile. They looked happy, genuinely happy, and it wasn't my mother. My hands shook as I untied the ribbon. The letters were from her. Her name was Lenora. They spoke of a secret love, of stolen weekends and whispered promises. They spoke of her dreams of being an artist and his of being something other than a CEO. And then they started to speak of a child, a daughter, a baby girl born on March 15th. Her name was Alara. It all crashed down on me. The will wasn't madness. It was atonement. Alara Vance wasn't a stranger. She was my sister. The knowledge settled in my bones, heavy and cold. My father, the man who preached about honor, had lived a double life. And my mother, I thought back to her face in the lawyer's office. That blank stare. She knew, I don't know how, but she knew. Our entire perfect, polished, privileged family was a lie. The address I'd found for Alara was for a walk-up above a bookstore. For 3 days, I just drove there and sat in my car, staring at her window. What could I possibly say? Hi, turns out our dad is the same guy, and my family is trying to ruin you to take back the only thing he ever really gave you. Finally, I got out of the car and walked up the 3 flights of stairs. I stood in front of her door, apartment 3B, for a full minute before I could make my hand knock. The woman who opened it looked nothing and everything like my father. She had his eyes, that same deep, thoughtful brown, but her face was framed by a cascade of dark, wild curls. She wore paint-splattered jeans and a t-shirt, and she looked at me with a wary expression. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice low and steady. "Are you Alara Vance?" I managed to say. Her eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "My name is Amelia. Amelia Sterling." A flicker of something crossed her face, recognition, anger, hurt. Then it was gone, replaced by a cool, guarded mask. "So, the vultures are sending scouts now. Let me guess. You're here to offer me a settlement to make me go away quietly." "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not why I'm here. They don't know I'm here. I came to," I trailed off. What had I come to do? I took a breath and held up the small metal box. "I came to understand," I said. "I found these from my father." Her eyes locked on the box, and for the first time her composure cracked. A wave of raw grief washed over her face, so profound it felt like I was intruding. She stared at the box, then back at me. "You should go," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "Please," I said, my own desperation surprising me. "I don't want to fight you. I just want to talk. I need to know the truth." She looked at me for a long moment, her gaze intense, as if she could see every lie I'd ever been told. Then, with a slow, weary sigh, she stepped back and opened the door wider. "You have 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes turned into hours. Her apartment was small, but filled with light and color. Canvases were stacked against every wall, vibrant and emotional paintings that seemed to hum with life. It was a home. It wasn't some miraculous, instant sisterly connection. It was tense and awkward. I told her about the will reading, about Daniel and Chloe's rage. She listened, her face unreadable. Then she told me her story. About her mother, Lenora, a brilliant artist who fell in love with a man who could never fully be hers. She told me about a childhood of secrets, of seeing her father on sporadic, unannounced visits. He was a friend of the family, a mysterious benefactor. She didn't learn he was her father until she was a teenager, after her mother passed away. He'd confessed everything then, telling her he was trapped by his own father's expectations, by his wife, by the gilded cage of his life. He supported Alara and her mother financially, but always from a distance, a ghost in her life. "He always promised he'd make it right in the end," she said quietly. "I never believed him. I thought it was just another empty promise. When that lawyer called, I was in shock. I never wanted the money. But it was the first time he had publicly acknowledged that I existed. It was the only thing he could give me that wasn't a secret." As she spoke, the image of my father shattered and reformed in my mind. The powerful patriarch I knew was replaced by a man torn apart by regret. That's when she showed me something that changed everything. Her mother's journals. In them, Lenora didn't just write about her love for my father. She wrote about Asterisk, her father, Alara's grandfather, an inventor, and once upon a time, a business partner to my own grandfather, Sterling SR. According to the journals, my grandfather hadn't built Sterling Industries on his own. He had stolen it. The core patents, the foundational technology the company was built on, it was all developed by Alara's grandfather. My grandfather had pushed him out, betrayed him, and taken all the credit, leaving him with nothing. Our family's fortune, our legacy, our very name, it was all built on a theft. My father had spent his life living with that guilt. His affair with Lenora wasn't just a romance. It was a misguided attempt to connect with the family his father had destroyed. The will wasn't just about his secret daughter. It was about returning a fortune to its rightful heir. We sat there in silence, the weight of a century of lies between us. Daniel's investigators were looking for dirt on Alara. They were looking in the wrong place. The dirt was on us. I looked at this woman, my sister, a stranger who held the key to my family's entire history. I saw an ally. "They're not just trying to take your inheritance," I said, a cold clarity in my voice. "They're trying to protect a lie, the same lie that trapped our father and stole your grandfather's legacy." "What are you saying?" she asked. "I'm saying," I began, a dangerous idea taking root, "that we shouldn't just defend the will. We should tell the whole story, your mother's story, your grandfather's. We should show the world what Sterling Industries is really built on." A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been silent for too long and was finally ready to scream. "You want to destroy your own family," she stated. "It was never really my family," I replied. "It was just a story they told me, and it's time for a new ending." Deciding to dismantle your own family feels like setting fire to your house while you're still inside. But for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose that was all mine. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about balance, taking a story written in secrets and rewriting it for everyone to see. Alara and I became a secret two-person army. While my family met with their high-priced lawyers to build a case against a conniving seductress, we were in her apartment, piecing together a different kind of case. Our weapons weren't legal motions. They were old letters, faded photos, and her mother's journals. Our plan was a slow-burn detonation. First, we'd dismantle the company's reputation. Second, we'd shatter the family's social standing. Third, the final personal blow. We needed concrete proof of the original theft. Alara's mother had mentioned old patent filings. I knew my grandfather was a meticulous record keeper, but those documents would be buried deep in the corporate archives, an impenetrable fortress. Except I had a key, a digital one. Years ago, my father had given me high-level admin access to the company's digital archives for a summer internship. "It's important to know where the bones are buried," he'd said. I don't think he ever imagined I'd actually go digging. For a week, I spent my nights on a burner laptop in Alara's apartment, searching the Sterling servers. It was terrifying. Finally, in a mislabeled deep archive folder titled Historical Agreements, I found it. The original partnership contract between my grandfather, Robert Sterling, and Alara's grandfather, Arthur Vance. And right next to it, the patent applications, filed solely under Robert Sterling's name, dated 2 weeks after the partnership was dissolved. It was the smoking gun. While I was the digital spy, Alara was the storyteller. She curated her mother's journals and our father's letters, pulling out the most heartbreaking quotes. She was painting a picture of tragedy with their words. We bundled everything, the legal documents, the letters, the journals, and a carefully written narrative, into a secure digital package. We didn't send it to a tabloid. We sent it to a respected Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, an old friend of Alara's mother. We gave her the story of a lifetime, an exclusive on one condition: publish it on the night of Sterling Industries' 75th anniversary gala. The gala was the crown jewel of my family's social calendar, a grotesque display of wealth and self-congratulation. My brother, Daniel, was set to give a keynote on the Sterling legacy of innovation and integrity. The irony was suffocating. The night of the gala, I wore a black dress, feeling like an executioner at a ball. My family was in their element. Chloe flitted from person to person, Daniel held court with investors, my mother glided through the room, a perfect hostess with a smile as brittle as spun sugar. They were all standing on a stage that was about to collapse. At exactly 9:00 p.m. my phone buzzed, a text from Alara. It just said, "Now." A moment later, a ripple went through the crowd. Phones lit up. A low murmur started, spreading like a virus. I saw a board member's face go pale. The journalist had just published her story. The headline was devastating. "The Sterling Legacy, 75 Years of Lies. How a Stolen Dream Built an Empire." The article laid out everything, with scanned documents as proof. It painted my grandfather as a thief and my father as a tormented man trying to atone. It revealed Alara's existence with heartbreaking empathy. The murmurs grew to a roar. Daniel, at the podium, looked out at the sea of faces staring at their phones, his own a mask of confusion. Someone shoved a phone in front of him. I watched the color drain from his face. Chaos erupted. I slipped out a side door, unnoticed. My part in the public spectacle was over, but the private one was just beginning. I went home and waited in the library. An hour later, the front door slammed open. Daniel, Chloe, and my mother stormed in. "You," Daniel hissed, throwing his tablet on the desk. "This was you. You gave them this. You destroyed us." "I didn't destroy us," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights. Grandfather destroyed us when he stole Arthur Vance's work. Father perpetuated it by living a lie. And you," I looked at him, then at Chloe, "were so obsessed with the money you never stopped to ask if we even deserved it." "Deserved it," Chloe shrieked. "It was our birthright. Our lives are over." "Your life of spending stolen money is over, yes," I said. Then I turned to my mother. She stood by the fireplace, looking old and fragile. "You knew," I said softly. "You knew about Lenora, about Alara." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a venom that shocked me. "Your father was a weak man," she said, her voice dripping ice. "He wanted to confess, to give it all back. I spent 50 years protecting this family from his weakness, from the truth. I kept us strong. And you, in one day, have undone all of it. For what? For some bastard child he sired in a moment of pathetic regret." That's when I understood. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect of the lie. The doorbell rang. "That," I said, "would be the second part of the plan." I opened the door. It was Alara, calm and resolute. I led her into the library. Alara looked at them with a sad finality. She placed an envelope on the desk. "My lawyers have filed an injunction against the estate," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Not to contest the will, but to enforce it. They've also filed a suit on behalf of my grandfather's estate against Sterling Industries for the recovery of intellectual property and damages. With the evidence we have, they're very confident. The will gives me control of the company, and the first thing I intend to do as CEO is settle that lawsuit in full." Daniel gaped at her. "You'll bankrupt the company. There'll be nothing left." "There was nothing to begin with," Alara replied. "It was all a debt that was never paid." She then looked at me. "The money from the settlement, whatever is left of the personal estate, it will be split, 50-50, between the two daughters of William Sterling." The finality of it all settled over the room. They had lost more than money. They had lost their story, their identity. Daniel sank into a chair, defeated. Chloe was openly sobbing. My mother just stared into the empty fireplace, the matriarch of a fallen kingdom. Alara and I walked out of that house and didn't look back. We left them in the ruins of a life built on a crime. It was a brutal, painful reckoning, but it was necessary. If you've ever had to make an impossible choice, or if our story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I really want to know what you think, so leave a comment below. It's been a year. Sterling Industries is no more, dismantled to pay the debt to Alara's grandfather's estate. The family name is now synonymous with scandal. I haven't spoken to my mother. Alara and I used the money to start a foundation in her mother's and grandfather's names. It gives grants to young artists and inventors, people with dreams who just need a chance. The inheritance wasn't a prize. It was a tool to build something new, something clean. We're not just allies, we're sisters. We're building a new family, one based on truth and respect, not secrets and obligations. It's a slow process. We're two strangers bound by a complicated legacy, learning how to belong to each other. Some days it's hard. But then we'll be sitting in her studio, surrounded by her art, and I'll see our father's eyes looking back at me, and I know we're exactly where we're supposed to be. My father built a second life to escape his first. In the end, he gave me and Alara the chance to build a single, honest one from the wreckage. I destroyed my family, it's true. But in doing so, I found a real one. So what would you have done? Would you have fought for the money or for the truth?